Hey everyone, how you doing? So, balancing in gaming. It's a tricky subject to tackle in any serious way, you know what I mean? Just take a look at something like the meta for Fortnite. Some people will simply always feel that it's unbalanced, and that some inputs have an easier time playing the game than others, like the whole controller scare in 2020. Yeah, I'm sure some of you remember that, don't ya? Well, this video is not a serious balancing video. No, I just figured I would talk about PopCap instead. No big deal. Look, I love PvZ, you guys should be well aware of that. So please believe me when I say that this video doesn't go any further than, wow, this is pretty goofy. I don't care that much about the sheer horrific balancing some of these games have. I more so think it's fun to point out this stuff, and show how even in the modern era, PopCap will never be spot on. So why don't we go through every game in the franchise to show you what I mean. We'll start with PvZ 1, and let's be completely honest, many, and I mean many of you, are going to say this game is fine. It isn't. Have you ever considered why Puff-Shroom is so used in this game? Or Gatling Pea? Or Cattail? Or hey, you could even say something a little lower tier, like Starfruit. Even if we go from the best plants to the weakest, there's a very clear power imbalance with some of the roster. The fog levels are by far the worst with this, since plants like Cactus and Planturn are immediately outclassed by Blover, a plant that could take both gimmicks those plants specialize in, and it's just not fair, is it? Even in the first game, there's just some plants who aren't as good as others, and that's a theme you'll see across this video. None of the PvZ games are perfect, but we all love them anyways because they're fun. Though if we're getting on the topic of poor balancing, and in particular power creep, well, no game in this franchise does it better than PvZ 2. I've always wanted to talk about how poor PvZ 2's balancing is in a video, but the issue is that the topic is so played out now. As the years have gone on, PvZ 2's just gotten more and more unbalanced, and it's to the point where even the strongest of plants for years are getting power crept too. Pokra, I love you, but Ice-Shroom is disgusting. You're getting replaced. Of course with this game, since real world money can play into getting most plants, this is a much bigger issue, but The only circumstances where having these plants would matter is essentially for Arena. So as long as you're not a hyper-competitive PvZ player, who likely already faces cheaters as is, you're really not missing out on much. It's just interesting to see that PvZ 2 is a very flawed game in this regard. It's almost impressive how much PopCap have one-upped themselves in the balancing department so consistently. Though it is pretty unfortunate that most adventure plants are actively weaker than a solid premium any day, and are more of a handicap to the player than anything else. It's tragic, but hey, how about you try to balance a game that's long past its expiration date? You wouldn't be able to do it. Though some mods try, and there's a pretty good reason why most mods cut out the entire premium lineup. That's all I'm gonna say. We'll take a small detour in this video to discuss Adventures, and while Adventures seems like a more difficult game to explain, it's actually not. See, there were these premium plants that you could rent out for a level, and let's just say that they were really broken. Power Flower, you might have been forgotten by the masses, but I will never forget. This is broken. Broken. Okay, exaggerated tone aside, Adventures is surprisingly not the worst. It's just fine. And honestly, I can accept that. It's still microtransaction torture, but it's not PvZ 2, and that's an immense step up. Okay, we'll go ahead and now tackle every shooter game before moving on to the final stuff, but every single one of these games could genuinely be a video of their own. I would stretch things out that far if I genuinely had a point to make, but again, I don't. This entire video is essentially one big chuckle at how messed up the games are when it comes to balancing. So why don't we get started with Garden Warfare 1? And oh boy, where do we get started here? The poor plants. Okay, actually no, that's wrong. The plants are not the real victims in this game, though neither are the zombies. God, I just feel bad for normal players. I think that's really the main point. So, Garden Warfare 1 has a very weird meta, but once you understand it, you can only really play said meta, since it's kind of the most enjoyable part of the game. Let me explain what I mean. Progression in Garden Warfare 1 is heavily tied to being good at the game, and what that means is that you're more incentivized to play the best variants than in any other game. I'm being dead serious when I say this. The only time I've ever caught someone playing off meta was when they were a new player or a high rank board. That's it. This really wouldn't be a problem if it wasn't for the fact that many of the top characters in this game benefit from the really weird choice PopCap made with the health system. If you've never played Garden Warfare 1, then you're gonna be in for a shock when I say this. You cannot heal to full health without a healer. That means that most characters are going to be around 75 HP or lower after walking out of tough fights. And guess what characters can make use of that? Fire characters, characters with crazy splash, and even just really good ranged characters can absolutely ruin your day. Anyone with a high DPS will make your life miserable for a match, especially if they're good. So despite Garden Warfare 1 only having around 60 variants, there's still a very obvious difference between characters like Super Commando and, I don't know, Commando P? Sure. You just don't see much variety in this game, and honestly that's fine, but it does admittedly get a little boring when you constantly have to play the best of the best or fight them to get some challenges done. And Garden Warfare 2, while not having that system, somehow fumbled harder. One thing I didn't mention for Garden Warfare 1 is that the character upgrades are given to you in sticker packs. So even if you don't play a specific character, eventually you'll get all of their upgrades anyways. And the upgrades in these games are borderline necessities to fully utilize said characters. So Garden Warfare 2 decided to make that process much more difficult by forcing the player to actually play every character to get all character upgrades. This would be fine if it wasn't for the fact that Garden Warfare 2's most unbalanced characters completely topple Garden Warfare 1 standards. Some say modern Super Commando is actually better than Garden Warfare 1's iteration, and a similar sentiment is felt for characters like Electro P and Captain Cannon. Hell, this game has legendaries, which are quite literally designed to be better than most of their respective classes. It's kind of insane how unbalanced Garden Warfare 2 really is in that department, especially since some characters can be outright purchased if you so choose to. And while it's very crazy to think about, it's also not as terrible in this game overall. And I only say that because the regeneration in this game is normal, so Toxic P got knocked down a few pegs, which was for the better. And finally, as for BFN, it's mostly fine. For once, this is not my BFN bias speaking, I swear. If we actually look at the balancing of this game, it's not the worst thing in the world. There's a lot of reasons I say this, but I want to use some examples with the weakest and strongest characters on plants as my picks. My examples here are Rose and Citron respectively. Rose is a support character now, and I still think she was horrifically designed because her support just isn't as good as the other 4 supports, but with that being said, she can still pack a punch, and in the end, she can utilize her kit to make the most of the chaos she brings. And for Citron, I have zero arguments against him. He is genuinely overtuned. Characters like him in All-Star just suffer from weird choices made by BFN's team in an attempt to make the characters more appealing to play, and that shows with just how tanky they are. Citron is just impossible to kill at times, I swear. But overall for BFN, besides still needing upgrades for every character, and besides the slight advantage that zombies have over plants in some regards, the game is okay. Again, this is not my BFN bias talking. When we're comparing 3 incredibly unbalanced games, BFN is only slightly better than the other 2. But okay, now we're in the modern era of PvZ, specifically with PvZ 3 and Heroes, I guess. Maybe these games do a better job with balancing. Well, let's look at Heroes first. No, it does not. I'm not even a Heroes fan, but even I can tell that this game has issues. Ignoring the fact that you have to open an absurd amount of packs to even build meta decks, there was also code in the files for a little while relating to a balance patch that might still get pushed out, and it's bad from what I've heard. Puff-Shroom costing anything in any PvZ game will never not be funny to me, so I think you can understand my viewpoint here. And finally, for PvZ 3, to round off this video, is it balanced? Not really. Bonk Choi and Lightning Reed are really good in this game, and I don't think I even need to explain why. You've seen the footage of people getting swarmed. It's pretty clear this game was not meant for the faint of heart. So, what's the conclusion of this video? PopCap's balancing has always kinda sucked, but clearly nobody cares. Anybody who does care will simply not play a PvZ game unless it's PvZ 1. And to me, that's kind of an important takeaway. Despite the really poor balancing in all of these games, they're still fun and you can still enjoy them. So do just that. Alright, I'll be ending this video here now. Thanks to everyone who watched my thoughts on this topic until the end. If you enjoyed it, then maybe you could consider subscribing and telling me your thoughts in the comments down below. Also, I want to give a big shout out to my Extra Y-Side channel members, those being Dan B, Nicholas Vankowski, Sleepy, Song, and Johnny Homeowner. And alongside my one normal member, thank you all so much for your continued support. You rock. And as for me here, I'm gonna go, I don't know, make a biased Garden Warfare 2 tier list and post it on Reddit? Sure, that sounds fun. Peace.